we have 7 Noahide laws, Shalom-B'nei Noach. One of them appears to be a positive mitzvah, which is the mitzvah to establish courts of law, but the rest are all considered negative mitzvot, prohibitions. And my approach to education thus far has been to try to teach out what I call the logical positive, meaning to say the Torah is very clear about what not to do, but what should one do? Okay, we understand that a person should not worship avodah zarah, idolatry. So the last 13 lectures have all been dedicated to what it means to positively believe in God. And now we are going to be going through the rest of the Sheva Mitzvot in a similar fashion. I will touch upon the Sheva Mitzvot in their prohibitive sense as well, but I want to lay the foundation by showing you that there is a life to live proactively as B'nai Noach. So tonight I'm going to begin with a concept which really is the foundation for everything, which is Yirat Hashem, the fear of God. That is a poor translation. The word yirah does not mean fear in the plain English sense of the word, as in you're afraid of a mouse or you're afraid of a thunderstorm. Fear in this sense means a kind of, it's the response to feeling awed by something. When you recognize that Hashem is all-knowing and all-seeing. There happen to be 6 or 7 repetitions of a particular phrase. All of them are in the book of Leviticus, which is V'yareita melakecha ani Hashem. You will fear the Lord your God, I am God. Why does this have to be said? In other words, obviously, God is God. All the places where that phrase is mentioned are mitzvot that have to do with things that nobody else but God sees. Hashem is aware of absolutely everything at all times. And not only that, like for example, right, one of the prohibitions in the Torah is not to place a stumbling block before the blind, which we understand in practical application to mean that you don't give people bad advice that's going to bring them to harm. Now, blind, Rashi says, summa bedavar, meaning somebody who is blind to the implications of something, blind to the elements of the circumstances, and therefore you're leading that person astray is an avera, is a transgression. Then Hashem says, Ani Hashem, meaning they might be blind to what you're doing. They might might understand. The same thing as you shall not curse a deaf person. Okay, you can curse a deaf person; they don't hear you. What difference does it make what you say to them? And then it says, "V'yareita melakecha ani Hashem," and you shall fear God. I am God, meaning that He didn't hear you, but I heard you. And one of the last of the 13 principles of faith are that there is a concept of reward and punishment. Now, yirah, the fear of God, is not connected so much to reward, but it is definitely connected to the concept of divine punishment. And in this case, we are to connect to God in the simplest fashion. We understand that we have consequences to face when we do the wrong thing. So the fear of God, the awareness of God's ever presence in our lives, is something that is there to keep us from doing this, keep us from doing the wrong things. The fear of God and the laws concerning blasphemy, which we are going to speak about tonight, are central pillars in the Torah tradition, which shape moral and ethical conduct. What these principles emphasize is the constant awareness of God's presence and the need to act in ways that reflect that awareness. So tonight we're going to explore the implications of the fear of God as a guiding principle and its relevance for B'nai Noach. And we're going to delve into some of the intricacies of the laws concerning blasphemy, which provide a framework for understanding these principles. And we're going to be bringing sources as you have them on the source sheets. I just wanted to start as an introduction with two verses from Genesis chapter 20, verses 10 and 11. It says, "And Abimelech said to Abraham, 'What did you see that you did this thing?' And Abraham said, 'I said, there is simply no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife.'" This passage, the context for the passage is Abraham expresses his concerns about the lack of fear of God in Gerar. For those who do not know biblical geography, Gerar is what we refer to today as Gaza. Now, this is related to the concept of the fear of God. Abraham's words in this passage reveal how the fear of God influenced his actions. He was in a foreign land, and his fear for his life led him to make a decision that involved deception. He referred to Sarah as his sister. It just so happens to be that she was his sister from his father. But as we will find out, B'nai Noach are actually allowed to marry somebody like that. They are not allowed to marry a sibling from the mother's side, but they are allowed to marry a sibling from the father's side. But again, it's still deception in the sense that her actual relationship to him is that she is his wife. But he was in fear of his life. And underlying this decision was his belief that the people in Gerar did not possess a proper fear of God. He was concerned that their lack of moral and ethical values might lead to a threat against his life and the integrity of his marriage. So Abraham's actions and his statement to Abimelech highlight the fear of God as a moral compass. His fear of God played a significant role in shaping his behavior and decisions, illustrating how it can influence one's choices, even in challenging circumstances. In the broader context, discussion of the fear of God and the laws concerning blasphemy, this passage reinforces the idea that the fear of God is not confined to religious rituals, but rather extends to ethical conduct, guiding individuals to act with reverence and awe because they're aware of God's presence. And it provides a practical example of how individuals can evaluate their surroundings and the behavior of others based on their perception of whether a proper fear of God is present. Now, Yirat Hashem is a commandment that transcends religious boundaries. It encompasses both B'nai Yisrael and B'nai Noach. The commandment underscores the need for individuals to live their lives with a constant awareness of God's presence and the consequences of their actions, and it's rooted in a biblical verse from Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 20, "The Lord your God you shall fear," which serves as a powerful deterrent against sinful behavior. The full verse is, "The Lord your God you shall fear, he shall you serve, to him shall you cleave, and in his name shall you take oaths." And we see the commentary of the Ibn Ezra on that verse where it says, "You shall fear the Lord your God." Why? So that you do not transgress the negative commandments. It's a constant type of awareness that an individual has to maintain, even during the briefest moments. Failing to do so, especially during times of temptation or sin, constitutes a violation of this positive commandment. So here we have a positive commandment to fear God. Let's talk about its significance for B'nai Noach. Because after all, it's not one of the Sheva Mitzvot, is it? On the other hand, it's one of those kinds of attitudes and principles that is intellectually compelling. Anybody who would think about it for a moment, it would become obvious to them that this is something that they need to cultivate within themselves. We see in the Sefer HaChinuch, this is mitzvah number 432, the following. This commandment is practiced in every place and at all times and by the entire human species. This is something that we find in the Sefer HaChinuch over and over again, that he will explain the commandment and then he will tell you who it applies to and when it applies, meaning that there are certain commandments that are not in force, for example, as long as the temple doesn't exist. There are certain things that will become relevant again, will become applicable again when we have the third temple. And there are certain mitzvot that are incumbent upon Jews alone. And there are some mitzvot that are incumbent upon male Jews alone, or Kohanim, or Leviim, the priestly class, the Levites. Here we have something entirely unique. It says this commandment is practiced in every place and at all times. Doesn't matter where you are on the planet. Doesn't matter what year it is. And by the entire human species. And this is one of the constant commandments upon a person, that the obligation not ever be interrupted from upon a person, even for one instant. And one upon whom the matter of a sin comes to his hand is obligated to arouse his spirit and to place into his heart at that juncture that God, blessed be he, oversees all the actions of people and takes vengeance according to the evil of the deed. And one who transgresses this and does not apprise his heart of this at those times, meaning that we end up in situations every day where we have a choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing. In that moment, we need to draw upon Yirat Hashem, the fear of God. This is the specific time, meaning to say in that juncture is the specific time for the fulfillment of this positive commandment. However, for a person to stand with alacrity and to remember it during all of his times is included in the commandment as well. It's not just that we're waiting for a particular moment of being in a compromising position. We try to work on Yirat Hashem so that it informs all of our actions at every moment of the day, even before the challenge comes. So we see that as this applies to the entire human species, B'nai Noach are encouraged to embrace the fear of God as a foundational principle in their ethical and moral framework. The fear of God, although deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, because this is where we get it from Torah, extends its significance to the broader human experience. It instills a greater sense of responsibility and accountability, reminding individuals of the divine presence and the consequences of their actions. Can you imagine what this world would be like if the fear of God would be raised to the proper level? If that was part of the thinking process. it's something, it would be incredible. Because right now, very often, we make decisions about what to do based on our subjective wants or desires, or whether or not we like the person that we're dealing with. But if we had the sense that God was watching in all these circumstances, that would be amazing. This is something that offers universal guidance for individuals of all backgrounds who seek to live righteous and ethical lives. And it reflects a shared moral compass that transcends religious boundaries. The point is here, what does it mean? What is a moral compass? I think what the Torah is teaching us here is that this is not just something that we have to learn and take in from the outside. This is not just an externally imposed idea. It's not like an external hard drive that we have to plug into ourselves. God created us in such a way that we actually do have a moral compass inside. In modern terminology, we refer to this as the conscience. And I'm not talking about the conscience from a Freudian perspective. I'm talking about the good old definition of conscience that we knew before we entered into a world of relativistic thinking. You know, the kind of intuition that people have when you go into a house and you know whether this is a happy home or not, because you just feel that in your gut. Those are the kind of instincts that we're talking about. Now, of course, the way the world is today is we become very disconnected from this natural endowment. So what the Torah is teaching us here is that we have to pay attention to it. We have to get this mechanism working to a very, very accurate and high level of functioning so that we can really tune in to what the needs of the moment are, to what does God want in this moment for me? What decision does God want me to make here? That is an outgrowth of a well-developed Yirat Hashem. Now, this is connected with the concept of blasphemy, which is one of the negative commandments that B'nai Noach need to make. The word blasphemy is, in a certain sense, culturally new to me. I didn't grow up with this word blasphemy. We don't talk about it a lot in Jewish circles. We certainly didn't talk about it in secular circles. I think the first time I ever heard anybody use the word, I was watching the Blues Brothers, and Aretha Franklin yelled at Matt Guitar Murphy. She said, "Don't you blaspheme in here." And I had to go look that up. What does that mean? Now, upon further research, when I learned through the passages in the Gemara and Sanhedrin, you know, from page 56a all the way down to the bottom of the page, we have a Mishnah and a full section dealing with this concept. It is such an unbelievable sin from Chazal's perspective that they refer to the problem of blasphemy, which effectively means to curse, God. And they phrase it as Birkat Hashem, blessing God. They use a complete euphemism for the term, lest we even put those two words together. And it's something that carries the death penalty for everybody. It's a very, very, very strict problem. The Mishnah there, the Gemara there, has a very technical description about how this is done. It's not just to say something wrong or say something that would offend somebody else's religious sensibilities. There's a very specific type of thing that needs to happen. I'm not going to lay it out here because I don't want anybody to get any strange ideas, and you never know where this information, which is going to be published on YouTube, will end up. Okay? But we know that it is a very severe crime. There's a verse in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 16, which says, and he who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him, both the stranger and he that is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. Now, capital punishment is not meted out when in the absence of a Sanhedrin. And there is no Sanhedrin that will be able to give capital punishment without the presence of the temple. But we've seen throughout history, I believe it was Rabbi Akiva who said that if one person was executed in 70 years, that was considered to be a hanging court. It's not something that gets doled out. It sounds like when you read Torah text, like people are always getting stoned. Like everybody must get stoned. I'm sorry, but I had to say it. Any Bob Dylan fans out there? Anyway, I just emphasize at this point that the most important thing to understand when you see the death penalty assigned to something in Torah is simply to understand and integrate the fact that this is a very, very severe problem, that the Torah views this as a very severe problem, that God hates this. And that's why the stakes are so high. If we look in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 56a, the question is asked, how does Rabbi Meir understand the phrase, both the stranger and he that is born in the land? Here we're talking about a convert to Judaism or a born Jew. Both of them would be liable to death by stoning, while a non-Jew by the sword. We discover that the punishment for all transgressions of the Shiva Mitzvot B'nei Noach is death by the sword, unlike Jewish law, which has a different penalty for Jews. And the next source, it is taught in a Baraita. This is like an auxiliary Mishnah. Why must the verse state, anyone who curses his God shall bear his sin? Isn't it already stated, and he who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death? Now we're talking about the verse prior to the one we quoted, which is Leviticus 24, verse 16. We're now talking about verse 15. There it says, anyone who curses his God shall bear his sin. In fact, let me just read that in the Hebrew for you. It says, Ish ki yikalel elikav v'nasa chet-o. Okay? Ish. There's a repetition of a word. It really would read literally as a person who curses. Why do we have a repetition of things? There is never a repetition of a word without that being a signpost saying there's extra information here. The Gemara asks, didn't we already state that he who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death? But rather, since it's stated he who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death, we might have thought that one would only be liable for cursing the ineffable name of God. I mean, to say that a person would only incur the death penalty if they actually uttered this curse using one of the names of God, using God's unique name. So from where is it derived that the verse includes one who curses any of the appellations as well? I'm not talking about the Appalachian Mountains. Appellation means any of the other terms people use to refer to God. The verse states anyone who curses God, to indicate that one is liable to be executed. In any case, this is the statement of Rabbi Meir, meaning to say that even though blasphemy technically involves an untoward uttering of God's actual unique name, we find out because of the other verse that God has other names. There are other terms for God besides the Shem Hashem. We call God Elohim. We refer to him as Tzavakot or Harachaman, the merciful one, Rahmana. And there are many, many, many different terms. What we find out from this part of the Gemara is that uttering a curse and using any one of those nicknames, as it were, still incurs a person the death penalty, according to Rabbi Meir. So the Talmud here is noting a difference of opinion between two sages. One of them regards the repetition of the word ish to include non-Jews, while the other understands it to refer to expressions other than God's unique name. We see then that the Rambam, bringing this forward to practically applied law, says in the Laws of Kings and Wars, chapter 9, halacha number 2, a ben Noach who blesses God, we know what this means because blesses is in quotation marks, whether he does so using the unique name or any other expression denoting him in any language, is liable for blasphemy. In this regard, the law regarding blasphemy is actually stricter for non-Jews than it is for Jews, the way the Rambam has it here, because Jews are liable to the death penalty for specifically uttering the unique name of God, whereas apparently B'nai Noach would also be punished for uttering a curse using any of the other names. That's the technicalities. We have to ask one more question, which is like, how far does this extend? Right? We have many different descriptions of God that become sort of a name for him throughout the Torah text. Does this extend to the colloquial uses of words that we use to refer to God? We look in the Rambam in the Laws of Oaths, chapter 2, halacha number 2, it says the same laws apply whether one took an oath. Which here we're talking about, the Rambam is talking about what kind of oaths are valid. Right? Since we saw in the verse above, we saw it in Leviticus 24, verse 16. Sorry, it was in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 20, that it says uvishmo tishoveh. It's when you take an oath, you have to take an oath in the name of God, using the name of God. So the Rambam here is giving us an answer to the question of what kind of names could be used for an oath. So he says the same laws apply whether one took an oath or another person administered an oath to him with God's ineffable name, the one you are not supposed to erase, or with one of the descriptive terms used to refer to him. Like he took an oath on he whose name is gracious, on he whose name is merciful, on he whose name is patient. Regardless of the language he used, the statement is considered an oath in the full sense of the term. Similarly, says the Rambam, a statement with the terms Elah or Erur is considered an oath, provided one mentions one of God's names or one of the terms used to describe him. What is implied? And then he gives a few different examples. So, truthfully, if I would imagine that if you used a word like Allah when you're uttering a curse, that a person would run into the same problem. And I would say, in light of what we seem to be experiencing in the contemporary sense, that if you go out and scream Allahu Akbar and then you murder somebody, I don't see how that is not blasphemy. Something to think about. In the general sense, we're talking about the act of speaking disrespectfully or offensively about God, and in a more distant sense, about sacred things that are related to our spiritual lives, the Torah, to Kedusha. It's a crucial aspect of understanding how the fear of God and moral conduct apply. We want to cultivate a kind of a sensitivity that there's at least one area of our lives that we've created the space for God to dwell there And in that part of our lives, we conduct ourselves with a certain refinement. We tread carefully. We don't want to distance ourselves from him. Yirat Hashem is all about the fear. It's not just the fear of God himself, but it's also the fear that you feel in the presence of a king. On Rosh Hashanah, we refer to God as Avinu Malkeinu. These are two opposite types of experiences. Avinu, he's our father. That's a feeling of closeness and love. Malkeinu is something else. Malkeinu, our king, is something that is supposed to inspire Yirat Hashem. Why? Well, if we still had such a thing, you have the king in his castle. His castle is guarded. There are turrets on all four sides. There are archers waiting on the top to pick off anybody who gets too close to the castle. And there are guards at the gate. And there's a moat filled with alligators swimming around it. And you have to cross that moat in order to get in the first place. And then on the other side of the moat, you have the whole army stationed, so nobody gets there. You know that if you are fortunate enough to be granted an audience with the king, you'd probably take a haircut and make sure that your clothes had gone to the cleaners and that there's not a speck on your shirt and that your shoes are polished and that you stand at attention properly when you're in his presence. Right? That's Yirat Hashem. Yirat Hashem comes from that feeling of God's omnipotence, God's being distant. What does it mean, distant? God is eminently close to you at all times, but distant in the sense that he's nothing like you. The complete, absolute distinction between God and man in all the aspects that God possesses, all of his qualities, all of his infiniteness, all powerfulness, all knowing, things that no mortal possesses. That's the distance. And there's another thing that creates distance between us and God, and that's sin, transgressions. So the real problem of sin and transgression is that not only are we violating his will, not only are we transgressing what he has stated specifically that he wants from us, we're creating distance between ourselves and God. We're straining the relationship. And we know the opposite is also true, that when we do the Ratzon Hashem, that brings us close to him. And the more we do that, and the more we integrate him into our lives, the closer we become. And this is the good. This is the ultimate good. This is what King David said, Kirva l'Elokim li tov. Good, as far as I'm concerned, is closeness to God. As we saw, the fear of God and the laws concerning blasphemy are interconnected elements that guide moral and ethical conduct within the Torah. Talking about constant awareness of the presence of God and the need to act in ways that reflect this awareness. What we've done today is explore the profound significance of the fear of God and the intricate laws concerning blasphemy. Principles are central to shaping moral and ethical conduct, emphasizing the constant awareness of God's presence and its impact on our actions. We've also examined their relevance for all human beings and how they serve as a moral compass for all individuals, regardless of their religious background. I would also add, regardless of their political orientation. There was once an argument that broke out just in a conversation I was having with a bunch of people who were debating the merits of capitalism versus communism or socialism. And a friend of mine said something I thought was very wise. He said, if there's no Yirat Hashem, all of these systems can be horrible. And if there is Yirat Hashem, if the leaders, if the people ruling a country, administering the country, are guided by Yirat Hashem, it almost doesn't matter what political system, what political philosophy is being employed. Because either way, the decisions are going to be made in a way that's powered by the fear of God. We saw the practical example from Genesis chapter 20, verses 10 to 11, where Abraham's fear of God influences his actions. He detects in Gerar that there is no Yirat Hashem, and therefore has to engage in deception. And it illustrates how these principles can guide individuals even in challenging circumstances. The fear of God as a universal commandment serves as a deterrent against sinful behavior and fosters a sense of accountability and responsibility in our actions. Halavai to experience that from people who are in positions of power. Also, the laws concerning blasphemy, especially when God's name is invoked, demonstrate strict consequences of irreverence and disrespect toward the divine. This connection between blasphemy and the fear of God underscores the importance of ethical conduct. We've begun our journey into principles that offer timeless insights into the human experience that transcend religious boundaries and provide a shared moral compass for all. The fear of God and the laws concerning blasphemy call us to live virtuously and maintain a profound connection to the divine, inspiring reverence and awe in every aspect of our lives. May we be blessed to experience this always by cultivating this characteristic of Yirat Hashem.